Hey, Randy Joe here, and welcome back to the channel, where today we are going to listen to the brand new Ethel Cain album, Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You. And before we get started today, I just want to say if you want to see the full, unedited reaction to this LP, go ahead and check out my Patreon down below. For just $5, you will get this video unedited, as well as Preacher's Daughter if you're interested. It's already up there on the Patreon, so check that out for just $5. This is the second album from Miss Ethel Cain, following her incredible debut LP, Preacher's Daughter, an album that I just did a reaction to for the first time last week, my first time experiencing that album. And it was an album that I thought was absolutely incredible, especially for a debut. Incredibly impressive in terms of songwriting and progression and arrangements and atmosphere. Just a gorgeous LP that took up about an hour and 20 minutes of its runtime, really pushing the limits of the kind of gothic field that it takes place in, and also just being a very interesting and unique story and concept album dealing with themes of abuse and trauma and how it kind of reflects back onto somebody in their relationships. And even though I found the album to be incredibly dark and depressing and at times hard to really take in and listen to, it is still an impressive record, and definitely one of the best records I've heard from 2022. But today we're covering this release here. It came out just a week ago, and of course it's an hour and 13 minutes with 10 tracks, meaning some of these tracks are going to be pretty lengthy, which is not, too unusual for Ethel Cain, especially if you saw her work from earlier this year, Perverts, where it was much more kind of ambient in tone. This one, though, has a 10-minute track and a 15-minute track for a closer, meaning just 25 minutes alone is just 2 tracks. So a pretty massive release this is, and it is a prequel to the story that was Preacher's Daughter, where, of course, on Preacher's Daughter, we saw Ethel Cain, a character who was abused by her father, and how it played into these relationships, how it affected her. On top of that, she kind of alluded to her first love, Willoughby Tucker, who we will be, of course, checking out and listening to today, and seeing their relationship and how it kind of took shape and formed, the basis of Preacher's Daughter. I'll avoid the spoilers, though, for Preacher's Daughter, and I'll say, maybe Willoughby Tucker was the one that got away. And unfortunately, because of their, split, she went into a very dark direction, and things ended horribly for her. Very hard to stomach. Pun intended there. But without further ado, let's get into the first track here, Janie, 5 minutes, which is relatively short for Ethel. Let's just give it a listen. Of course, we'll have the Genius annotations carried through to kind of follow along with the story of the LP. Without further ado, though, let's go, Janie. Named after the character of Ethel Cain's only true best friend. I hope we get no pop cuts on this one. That was really my only drawback with Preacher's Daughter. I feel like we're back in this universe right off the bat. Love the kind of accent. Not sure if it's a natural accent for her, but love what she's putting on. Got some annotations from Ethel herself here. As Janie is Ethel's only real friend, she fears this marks the end of their relationship as she knows it, where Ethel had her best friend all to herself. Insecurities, of course, at the age of 16 is where the story is beginning. A very common thing, of course. Seeing your friends at that age get into relationships and start to phase you out a little bit definitely hurts. But part of life. Very sweet, wholesome lyric there. Could be alluding to some sort of deepened sexuality. but could just be a wholesome relationship of friends. Ethel very deeply insecure here. I love this, like, very sweet, gentle strumming. Hypnotic. Love how, like, melancholic and depressed this is, but not crushing. Much like Preacher's Daughter could be at times. I love that one. Very sweet. Sets the tone. Ethel is in a state of sadness here. You know, maybe she is a little happy for her friend to find someone, but at the end of the day, like many at that age, struggling with accepting that, you know, part of life is you know, losing some friends as they kind of pursue their own interests and find themselves. But a nice, sweet opener. Let's go into Willoughby's theme, where, of course, you know, we're being introduced to, I would imagine, Willoughby Tucker, who will be her first love. So maybe, you know, in the face of losing her friend to their love, she will instead find her own love, and it will be kind of sweet. Again, ignoring knowing what we know comes at Preacher's Daughter, but hopefully this album will be a much more uplifting sort of look at it, and kind of just a sweet sort of look into their relationship before things go down. So, continuing, Willoughby's theme, which is instrumental. Our man, Willoughby Tucker, coming into play here. Which we know very little about. Preacher's Daughter kind of teased him, but from the couple of tracks we had that talked about him, he seemed like maybe he's like a good man, a sweetheart, a kind soul. If this album progresses and Willoughby shows some true colors and ends up being as vile as who she's with later, I will be disappointed, because in my mind, Mr. Tucker here is a sweetheart. Man, great piano. Very gentle. Nice sparse arrangements. A bit of this dark ambient that Ethel certainly likes to explore. Willoughby's theme is quite dense. This layering continually more blaring and adding each edition here. It's almost suffocating. Very gentle, kind of warm embrace in a way, but at the same time just so blaring in its appeal. Very cinematic, especially. I will say, I wonder if this album will take an even more cinematic approach, because it seems like Ethel Cain has a great deal of interest in creating these cinematic stories. Let's go on to track 3, Fuck Me Eyes. This one, I believe, was the first single, if I'm not mistaken. I might be, though. Real quick, this song narrates Ethel's tumultuous emotions towards Holly Reddick, a fellow classmate constantly hanging around Willoughby. Ooh, bit of jealousy. Who Ethel assumes must be in love with the girl.
She's got her makeup done and her high heels on. She's got her hair up to raising children, but she's good at raising hell. Her daddy keeps her in a
bit of a bad girl here.
The boys can't get enough of her and her honey. Fuck me.
And her honey. Is that a bit of a euphemism, I wonder? Wow. Give this a pause. Certainly leaning a bit more into a pop direction, maybe a little bit of a synth pop leaning with these synths coming in. But right off the bat, I gotta say, you know, compared to the first LP with I believe it's called American Teenager, if I'm not mistaken. It was. I did not love that song. I thought it was a way too poppy, way too mainstream in its appeal. This one still has a bit of an edge to it, especially in the production side, feeling a bit more rough. And these synths coming in, right there. Subtle, sweet, very shimmery. And I love a nice, sweet synth pop track. Oh. Certainly the kind of girl that a lot of men are preying on, unfortunately, which is a little sad in itself. Maybe sometimes bringing unwanted attention. Maybe there's a sense of sympathy from Ethel here. She's jealous of her, but also maybe feels bad for what she goes through. Jeez. Not the kind of girl they want to bring home to the parents, perhaps, is the allusion there. Subtle meaning as well, maybe a double meaning to also not wanting to bring her to her own home, instead wanting to take advantage of her. A very twisted track this ended up being. I thought this was going to be a little bit more jealousy infused, but instead, I think Ethel here is playing with the idea of how sad it is to also be the popular girl in some circles. I love how much deeper we're going into Ethel's character here. That was actually quite a track, taking in the narrative. Again, Ethel does a great job at, hold on. Ethel, like I was saying, does a great job at kind of revisiting those themes of a generational trauma or a continued trauma, and how it seems to be very much like, again, this is embedded, unfortunately, into this character Holly in this track. She doesn't even realize that this kind of cycle of abuse and kind of adding to the way men can perceive women based on society's way is very unfortunate, very depressing. It takes a very dark look at it. You know, it's done with such subtlety, because at first you might just think this is a track of jealousy from Ethel, but on a deeper level seems a lot more psychological in terms of themes of trauma and the never-ending cycle of abuse, which is very unfortunate. So it's still a dark LP in a way, dealing with those themes. But here's Nettles. Not sure what that refers to. Maybe stinging nettles. I grew up in a pretty small town, and I know a thing or two about stinging nettles. Do not touch. Painful. Nettles are a group of flowering plants known for their stinging hairs. Yes, they are. I wonder how this will allude to the story here. Love the string arrangement in the background there, that twang. Bit of that almost Nashville country sound.
When I won't wake up on my own, wake up on my own. Held close
Maybe as a act of defense to these stinging nettles, this town, she just looks forward to this love with Willoughby. Is that the illusion there in the chorus? What a gorgeous track in terms of the arrangements. Love the heavy, like, country twang on it. It feels very authentic too and old-fashioned. These drums sliding in smooth with it.
down where the trees bend low. Me is to suffer me. And I
Just like love,
believe that
a little bit of pain with all that gain.
when I lay with you, and I want you for me. It's not that hard.
Love the trotting pace.
The wall you're scared of looks just like
Great rhythm.
I'm so blind all the time.
Seems like they are,
Not to
at this point, according to Ethel,
think of all the time.
according to Ethel here, they are essentially afraid to grow up and graduate and make a life for themselves. Again, something that is pretty common. Nobody wants to leave childhood behind. You know, it's so full of magic in a sense, and leaving it behind feels like you are becoming too real. But a very sweet passage, that pre-chorus is.
With you when I won't wake up on my own. Wake up on my own.
I like how
How close all the
simply more relatable this album is in a way.
time I'm half of you.
Full of teenage angst.
This was
And she is full of love in this chorus. A very pure track this is. Love this instrumental, really letting it grow. An 8-minute track, didn't even realize. Love how well paced it is. Certainly creeps up. Love that string deep within the mix there. Beautiful. So we've been introduced to Willoughby here. Oh, love that deep vocal. So Willoughby's coming to mix. The love is there. The love is pure. He's the only kind of good in Ethel's life at this point, it would seem. You know, her friend has turned away, and that's no shame in it. But here's Willoughby's interlude. Willoughby getting a lot of instrumentals. Man of no words, quite literally. We have nothing really about his character too much, other than that he is her purest love, it would seem, narratively. One thing I love and respect about Ethel Cain so far, with just the 2 LPs we've gotten, and I guess Perverts if you want to include that as well as a side LP, but she does not shy away from being experimental, despite the fact that she has been given quite a bit of popularity in the mainstream, I would argue. And for someone to keep doing these long, dark, kind of ambient pieces, and it's very respectable, you know. It'd be easier to just kind of throw it all away for the mainstream appeal, but she certainly respects the art and the form, which will most definitely affect her longevity, I would think, down the road. Because last LP and this one, they'll still be talked about in decades' time. Yeah, this is why people, they get it. Soothing yet melancholic. They sound similar to the music from the game Firewatch. Great comparison, by the way. Shout out Firewatch. Incredible game. I love the slowly kind of building atmosphere here. Progressively louder and louder with each second. If this album is a prequel, then this track is like the montage track that would play, showing the happiness that she once had with Willoughby. It has like a sense of peace and calm to it, but there's like almost like a sense of dread as well, or an impending doom. It's getting darker here with this piano. Man. Ethel loves her atmosphere, that's for sure. She does not shy away from runtime. Almost remind me of something Harold Budd would do. Great ambient pianist of the kind of 70s and 80s. Very cinematic. There's like that melancholic tone that, again, something he would do. Love that one. At 7.5 minutes, I mean, it's well paced, it's slow, it's hypnotic, it's just a beautiful track. You know, it's obviously not going to be for everyone, but for someone like myself, I love ambient music. Huge ambient fan. Wanted to do a whole series on ambient reactions until I realized how difficult that would be to portray in a reaction form, which is why I never covered perverts on the channel, by the way, because again, it's hard to react and kind of add context to ambience. But it is most definitely one of my most favorite genres, and I feel like Ethel Cain, at this point, you know, like, she's only been around for a few years now at this point, at least in the, you know, mainstream scene, and she's an incredible ambient musician and one to carefully create atmosphere in a way that is very intoxicating. So Ethel, give me more of that. I love it. Dust Bowl, let's keep going. 6.5 minutes. Let's see this narrative continue. I wonder. Left as empty as the title Dust Bowl, Ethel reminisces and reflects on the loss of her lover, Willoughby Tucker. Bit of a heartbreak track here. Willoughby, certainly obsessed with his girl, as any good man should be. Ooh, love that repeating line there. Oh yeah, like I said, He seems like a good man. Very timid. What a sweet, reminiscent track this is. Like I said, very timid clearly from these lyrics. The shy boy. Maybe they're getting a little high here. Oh, it's heroin use. Jesus. Interesting, a bit of a dark turn here. Certainly kind of alluding to maybe this relationship isn't as sweet and wholesome as we thought, given the drug use. They most definitely seem to love one another. I don't doubt that. But, some good relationships certainly have flaws that are not worth pursuing a relationship over, which seems to be maybe a theme within the album. Maybe not all good things are truly good. And that insecurity still deep from earlier on the LP with Holly. Seems like they are definitely both very depressed characters. Maybe they're both depressed teenagers going through the phases of teenage angst. And through this found one another and kind of amplified the depression, amplified the drug use through it. And in the end, again, a very pure and sweet, wholesome kind of first love that is, in the grander schemes of things, still a net negative experience, I guess you could say. Or destructive, at least, to both of them. Which is maybe that's why Willoughby turns away in the end. Unless he turns towards drugs and Ethel tries to escape it, but we know how things go for her, so. Another great track with strong songwriting as ever. Lots of subtleties as well, addressing the theme at the same time, but in a very subtle way, which, again, I think Ethel is very, very good at, in terms of delivering a lot with such a tight focus. Here is a knock at the door. Hold on real quick. Ethel here. Or at least co-signed by Ethel. This track dealing with Willoughby's father, the generational trauma again, and how he maybe in a sense is trying to escape this generational path, the generational sting. Ethel is haunted by her father and what he did to her, whereas Willoughby is also haunted by his father, but instead trying to maybe turn away from the pain and instead escape this cycle. And Willoughby escaping this depression. Maybe he doesn't want to be depressed any longer. He wants something to live for. A very sparse track this one is. There's guitar, a lot of reverb. I do find this track to be maybe the first of many tracks from Ethel. I'm not loving it as much as the others. Maybe just because it's not as dense in its arrangements, or as strong as it is narratively either. Things are most definitely getting darker as this LP carries on. Like, it's maybe one of the only tracks so far that I feel like actually kind of drags with its runtime, and yet it's only about 5.5 minutes compared to these much lengthier tracks. Like, Nettles was incredibly well paced in its 8-minute runtime, but this one does feel like it drags a little bit for me. Was definitely not my favorite. I'll say that. Probably my least favorite. Well, definitely my least favorite on the LP so far. Here's Radio Towers. Instrumental, which I love these. I love the instrumentals, so I'm fine with that. Oh. That beeping is interesting. I wonder what that's meant for. Could be foreshadowing Willoughby's death / leaving in the next song. I was gonna suggest that maybe the beeping was this hospital trip. Maybe he has OD'd from the heroin use. Maybe he has attempted to take his own life here. But if I'm not mistaken, at least the preacher's daughter, I don't think Willoughby passed. I think he willfully chose that maybe the relationship wasn't right for them, and he shut it out and decided to turn away from Ethel, given the track Home in Nebraska, which is a great song, where it's, from what I gather, made pretty clear that Willoughby willfully ended the relationship. So maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe Willoughby here is in the hospital bed, attempted to unfortunately take his own life. The generational trauma clearly impacting him heavily, and maybe when he comes out of this bed, this hospital, he decides to improve things for himself and to escape the cycle. Unfortunately, leaving Ethel behind in the process, but I mean, that is unfortunately sometimes necessary. I like how sparse this one is, but again, still feels a lot more textured and atmospheric, I find, than the last track. So given the fact that the last one's called A Knock at the Door and is kind of suggesting that Willoughby is considering taking his own life, or isn't afraid of death, at least, I think that is the conclusion here. He attempts to take his own life. I hope he makes the right choice going forward, though. Getting quite dark, this ending, as we enter Tempest. Ooh, smooth transition. By definition, a tempest is a violent, windy, often tumultuous storm, a given suggested by the rain-fueled backdrop of a house in Nebraska and her tornado-related imagery throughout the narrative of the two albums. It's possible he either died from the tornado, or maybe he leaves Ethel. Maybe there's not meant to be a distinct clarity. But a storm is brewing is the point here. This is being made. A storm within their town and maybe within Willoughby, as he weighs his options. Love these like layered vocals here. Maybe this will be a swirling storm of atmosphere soon. I wonder if it's gonna all come together in a way that's very climactic. Man, those vocals, so layered but washed out. Man, Ethel probably at her most depressed so far, at least in this album, with lines like, "Don't ask me why I hate myself as I'm circling the drain, cause death, it takes too long and I can't wait." Again, very dark, very depressed. Ethel embracing the idea of suicide. That's Willoughby with her vocals there. Man, the production on this is very sharp, clean. But so washed out at the same time. It's very hypnotic in that fashion. Clearly this plaguing Ethel's mind forever. Oh, there it is. That drop. Such slow yet pounding drums. Very heavy. Love this climax. I feel like the whole album built up to this final passage. Just a harsh cutoff there, as we hear this swirling storm come to a close, kind of leave us. But with that track, it seems like Willoughby officially ended things, whether it be his own life or just the relationship with Ethel. It's still a little bit vague, I think intentionally so you could take it both ways. But him saying here, am I what you think about all late at night? You can try and stop me, hold me, do all the things that you do, but it's no good. But with this batch of lines here, with Willoughby here coming into the narrative vocally, finally, after so long, I feel like he never actually said anything directly in the tracks. It can be taken two ways. Maybe he is committing suicide. He's already taken the action to do so. And here he's saying, you can try and stop and hold me, try to do everything you want, but it won't make a difference. I'm already done. Or you could take it as him saying that he's done, and he's letting her know, like, he's officially made his choice to leave her. And you can, again, try to stop him, but in the end, it's no good. I feel like both ways you look at it, obviously, no matter which way, it still plagues Ethel Cain forever in Preacher's Daughter, and of course leads in a lot of ways to what happens on that LP. Again, it's not his fault if he leaves her, and of course she goes down that dark path that she does. I think it's interesting how you as a listener, me as a listener, how you choose to take in this sort of twist here with Willoughby leaving. You could take it as, again, that negative, depressing outlook that he doesn't escape this trauma, and maybe he lets it plague him to the point of suicide, or he makes a choice to escape it himself and free himself of it by leaving Ethel and hopefully finding a better life. That's the one I prefer. I prefer the idea that Willoughby leaves her, and of course, she doesn't really let it go, and it results in her never escaping the generational trauma while he does. But if you take it the other way, in the much more depressing fashion that he kills himself, it still works, which I think is pretty impressive from a narrative standpoint, that she was able to write something that is as specific enough as a possible suicide or a breakup, but still vague enough that it can be taken both ways. Very open-ended, a great closer to this track, not album, because we have one left to go, but incredible climax. Loved it. Thought it was very impactful. Really all came together just like the storm that it alludes to. Here's the final track, Waco, Texas, 15 minutes, 15 seconds, the mammoth of the LP. Probably the most dense lyrically of the whole album here. Still plagued by Willoughby's decision here on this track. This was quite minimal in the layering. I like that. Love the lo-fi drums as the backbone there. Sweet little grouping there. Seems like Ethel's unable to fully grasp his reasoning, which makes sense given Preacher's Daughter's story, but still can't fathom the possible good decision he made. Certainly going through the motions of a breakup, asking if he hates her, a very common thought throughout a breakup. She's maybe a bit more of an optimist for their future, whereas he's thinking more realistically. That house in Nebraska here, coming back. And again, kind of alluding to certainly the house in Nebraska and that dream of living in that house. Again, alludes to their very kind of like childlike outlook on their love, not really looking at it in a realistic sense. I feel like Willoughby is certainly much more of a realist, and in doing so and being a realist, he has addressed the fact that the relationship is not meant to last, whereas Ethel cannot grasp it, cannot fathom why he would end things the way he did. Which again, very rich characters. I really like how layered a lot of the narrative has been with these characters. And every character I could talk about really has been quite layered, except for Logan. That guy's dead in the water. No matter how bad things get, there's still a sense of hope, unfortunately, for Ethel, which is maybe in some sense, really stopping her from growing. Right there, that sense of optimism holding her back from recognizing the trauma and struggles that they must learn and grow from. I love how well blended the vocals are with the rising synth work. Love the piano work too throughout this LP. It's very sparse, it's very careful. Always comes in right when you need it. Great closer, great final track. I feel like Tempest was the peak, the climax of the LP, whereas Waco, Texas feels like almost like the end credits, the kind of encapsulation of everything we have experienced so far, and alluding to what's to come as well with Preacher's Daughter. Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You. Let's talk about it, because that is a pretty lengthy album, an hour 13. I feel like the pacing has been fantastic with both Preacher's Daughter and this one. I think it comes down to just incredible songwriting and careful song structures that are very well paced with their climaxes and their kind of sense of slowness as well to them, the slow builds that are very rewarding if paid close attention to. Really make both albums incredibly easy to take in despite such a massive runtime. And a runtime of some of these tracks specifically, most of these going over 5 minutes. One thing, with Preacher's Daughter, when I gave that a listen, I said at the end in my final sort of roundup that I felt like, although an incredible, well-written album, I wanted more about Willoughby Tucker. I wanted a full sort of story about him so we can kind of understand this relationship a little bit deeper. That is what I said in that video. And guess what? This follow-up prequel LP delivers on that. I feel like we are getting the full kind of character type of Willoughby Tucker. We know he is kind of, from what it seems, a bit of a timid, sweet, kind of shy man, a very good, well-natured soul. But at the end of the day, he is plagued by his own demons, that being his father and his father's drug use of heroin, which comes into play and affects their relationship as well. Him and Ethel's relationship, to be clear. We see this very kind of layered character come through and how he is experiencing the same sense of generational trauma that Ethel experiences, but instead of letting it entirely consume him, he chooses to walk away from both the trauma and the relationship because it is a necessity to do so to break free from this cycle. Because maybe he sensed that Ethel's depression and trauma was impacting him, and the only way to grow himself was to cut off all negative sort of impacts, which unfortunately for Ethel, she could not fully wrap her head around in Preacher's Daughter, and it has impacted her in the way that it is all-consuming in the end. But I feel like we got the full kind of character arc of Willoughby Tucker, a much more rich look into him. Loved it. Thought it was fantastic. Thought it was well done. While I didn't love A Knock at the Door, I think narratively, I think it's a very strong track, and again, kind of suggests the drug use and the generational trauma of Willoughby and why he makes the decision in the last few tracks to end the relationship or end his life if you want to take on the darker look at it. But I personally think he is choosing to break away from this toxic love. And while this toxic love may seem very pure and sweet, like, a lot of toxic love does to those that are in it, it is very much an all-consuming love that is overall a net negative. And I think, again, Ethel Cain does an incredible job as a musician to kind of deconstruct trauma and these different characters and really write them in a way that feels super fleshed out in the same way a great novel would be, which is definitely one of the biggest takeaways I've taken from both these albums, is that Ethel Cain is a great songwriter, like an actually spectacular, underrated songwriter by today's standards. I feel like people don't bring up just how well written all the characters have been, even minor characters like, for example, Holly on Fuck Me Eyes. Again, shows the kind of trauma that is constantly addressed throughout both LPs, and it's done so very subtly by this one-off character who's literally in one track, yet feels very fleshed out in herself. So just incredible songwriting on both LPs and incredible arrangements throughout both LPs, and this one especially. Just felt it was very rich, very careful, very delicate. Love when the piano would come in. It was very soft and would kind of break up the pacing of the very heavy sort of ambience synth work that's in a lot of this LP. Overall, a very solid listen, and I'm very glad I listened to both records. I'm glad I, of course, listened to the first one to further understand this one. But even on its own, this is a pretty brilliant record that delves deep into these very complex themes. And I gotta say, aside from just the songwriting as well, the musical concepts and the arrangements are so incredibly atmospheric that I feel like she has crafted this very unique, powerful kind of gothic world that is just kind of one of a kind. And in that sense, Ethel Cain is crafting entire worlds, not just narratively, but sonically, and very unique in those worlds. So shout out Ethel Cain, shout out this album, a great listen. I'm glad I gave it a listen. Yeah, not much else to say about it. It's a good album, and so is Preacher's Daughter. So I'm glad I listened to it. I'm glad I listened to the fans that suggested Ethel Cain after all this time. But that does it for today's video. If you liked the video, please hit like and subscribe to follow along in listening to more albums alongside myself. New releases, old releases. We're listening to Cocteau Twins right now, their whole discography. We're also listening to the entire discography of Pink Floyd, getting towards the end of that. And if you want to see all those videos and this video and Preacher's Daughter unedited, check out the Patreon in my description for just $5. You get everything I've done unedited for just $5. But as always, my name is Randy Joe. I appreciate you watching, and I'm signing off.